Okay, welcome everyone to Srimad Bhagavatam, the daily class on the Bhakti Center channel. Our honor and privilege to have Kripamoya Prabhu again, second time this week. Thank you for taking out the time to speak with us. Kripamoya Prabhu is a senior devotee, disciple of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. He's based in the UK, and he serves at Bhaktivedanta Manor in various capacities. He's a teacher of Bhakti, a qualified priest. He's actually one of the funniest marriage priests that I've ever had a chance to sit in one of his marriages that he conducts. It's really funny and really deep. And he's a kirtan leader of repute. And of course, two of his three children, Jahnavi and Tulsi Devis, are connected with the Bhakti Center as community members, kirtan leaders, and leaders in general. So we're very grateful to him for taking time off and coming again and speaking Srimad Bhagavatam to us. Kripamoya Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. So good. So good to be in New York speaking. I feel as if I'm right there with you physically. And so good to be there twice. What's better than speaking at the Bhakti Center is to speak at the Bhakti Center twice. So we have a beautiful Srimad Bhagavatam section, 9th canto, 18th chapter. We'll go straight in. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We have some verses that do not have purports, and I'll conclude on the verse that does, which is 21. In the English translation, using such unkind words, Sharmishta rebuked Devayani, the daughter of Shukracharya. In anger, she took away Devayani's garments and threw Devayani into a well. If you're just coming into the story, there was a fight between two ladies who had been bathing, and when they saw Lord Shiva riding a bull, they had reached out to cover themselves with some clothing. They got each other's clothing, and of course one became very annoyed. So now we're coming mid-fight. So next, verse 18. After throwing Devayani into the well, Sharmishta went home. Now these were friends, folks. These were actually two, they were girlfriends. Meanwhile, King Yayati, while engaged in a hunting excursion, went to the well to drink water and by chance saw Devayani. So Devayani is down the well where she'd been thrown by Sharmishta. Seeing Devayani naked in the well, King Yayati immediately gave her his upper cloth. Being very kind to her, he caught her hand with his own and lifted her out. And now today's verse. Tam viram aho shanasi prema nirbhaya gira rajang stvaya grihito me pani parapuranja hastagraho paro nabud grihitaya stvaya hime Esha Isha Krito Vira Sambando. I'm putting my hands like this. Sambando no na Paurushaha. Translation. With words saturated with love and affection, Devayani said to King Yayati, O great hero, O king, conqueror of the cities of your enemies, by accepting my hand, you have accepted me as your married wife. Let me not be touched by others, for our relationship as husband and wife has been made possible by providence, not by any human being. Purport. While taking Devayani out of the well, King Yayati must certainly have appreciated her youthful beauty, and therefore he might have asked her which caste she belonged to. Thus Devayani would have immediately replied, sorry, that laugh is mine. We are already married because you have accepted my hand. Uniting the hands of bride and bridegroom is a system perpetually existing in all societies. Therefore, As soon as Yayati accepted Devyani's hand, they could be regarded as married. Because Devyani was enamored with the hero Yayati, she requested him not to change his mind and let another come to marry her. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Malitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Well, if this was 2021 and a young woman was down a well and a very qualified young man was to lift her out of the well, and she said, "Thank you for helping me out of the well. By the way, we're married." He would say, wait, that was a little bit quick. What happened to the, the dating and the courting and, the engagement and meeting your parents, and what happened to all that? You want me to marry you now? I've just touched your hand. But here is Devyani. She's saying, well, you've touched my hand now. That's as good as being married. And she was really keen. Actually, she was really keen. He was a big chap. He was very powerful. And she addresses him as such. She says, "You've conquered many cities. I've heard of your reputation. You're handsome. You've saved me now. So don't let anybody else take me away. Take me with you, please. We're as good as married now. You should accept this is by the grace of providence. This has all happened. God must have sent you. God must have arranged for you to be here at just the right time to save me." And of course, that to a certain extent, that's true. We have to understand, my dear devotees, the cultural situation in which these words were spoken. The women and men did not mingle. And when they were allowed to mingle, they were no longer single. The panigrunam, or the joining of the girl's hand with the boy's hand, is taken to be the essence of the marriage ceremony. And usually this panigrunam, it comes with the blessings of the assembled elders. Usually the wedding ceremony is created by the parents of the bride, and the gift of the bride includes the father and mother sometimes taking the bride's hand and placing it in the hands of, as they say in India, a suitable boy. And suitable means that perhaps Jyotish has been done, some astrology has been done, and we found out whether this marriage will be successful by the fact that the two astrological charts are compatible. We still do this. We don't depend on it completely, but we still do this. In that way, it is possible to avoid long courtships where the couple think, will he, won't he? Will she, won't she? Are we a couple? Do we have a relationship? Is it working? Are we meant for each other? Is this meant to be? Is he the one? Is she the one? All of that psychological flim-flam is cut out of the way by having a very scientific compatibility consultation. And then at a time chosen by the parents, the usually young woman is given in marriage. Now in India, there's a little bit of a pushback these days by saying, well, who am I? Do I not have any personhood of my own, that I'm just a piece of property that will be given by my mother and father? Do I not have any choice? And of course, that's legitimate. But when it is done scientifically and with the blessings of parents and the community, it is surprising how well it works. Ultimately, if you want to be scientific in relationships, you have to see what works. What doesn't work is what is often what's not working at the moment. So there must be a better system. If we like science, even in our love, then it is good to be scientific. So this joining of the hand was the one emblem, the one symbol. And in fact, it comes down to us. I do a lot of weddings, and I explain to people that panigruhanam, or taking of the hand, is followed by what's called hastabandha, which means tying the hands. Hastabandha, tying of the hands. And this comes down to us in the form of hastabandha, or husband, husbanda, husband. And this would sometimes be accompanied by elaborate ceremony, sometimes simple ceremony, and sometimes in the 8 different types of wedding ceremony. But the one known as the Gandharva ceremony is just an exchanging of flowers, or the taking of the hand and promising a nearby tree, making your promises under a tree. Of course, it sounds very romantic, doesn't it? We just met under a tree or on the side of a mountain, promised. This is to be considered a wedding which is not as blessed. It's considered a wedding, but it's sort of an emergency dharma rather than a common dharma or vyavaharika dharma. Vyavaharika means convention. So by convention, the joining of hands is seen to be the very emblem of a wedding. And then, of course, after the wedding comes the marriage, which means to remember the promises that you've made to each other under that tree or at that big festival wedding for the rest of your life, and to reenact them in your daily speech and actions towards your partner. So sometimes in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we find that these unusual situations would develop, and often between a king and a young lady. And of course, even today, any young woman would want to marry a king or a prince, isn't it? If you marry a prince, you have your photographs in every major magazine and newspaper. So even today, the idea of marrying a prince is still something that is aspired to. So this is Yayati. He comes along and he finds Devyani down a well into which she's been placed by Sharmishta. Now these young ladies, they were old enough to know better, because one of them was the daughter of Kashyapa. Kashyapa is a Prajapati. Kashyapa had many wives, and his wife Diti, she's the progenitor of a great family, but these are slightly opposed to Vishnu. Within the world, there's always a balance of those who are favorable to Vishnu, which we call the Suras, and those who are slightly opposed to Vishnu, although acknowledging his position. These are known as Asuras. And because the Asuras, or demonic forces, are the progeny of Diti, they are known as Daityas. So there's the Daityas, and then there's the Aditi, who gave birth to the Adityas, or demigods. And from Kashyapa and his wife Danu come this Sharmishta. So excuse me, that's Vrishaparva. And Vrishaparva is the son of Kashyapa and Danu. And he has a daughter, Sharmishta. So she was of noble birth, and she should have known better. But sometimes, these incidents are recorded for us and shown to us through the pages of the Bhagavatam to show that tempers can flare up at any moment. not simply in Kali Yuga, that it is the age of quarrel, but even in bygone times, even many thousands of years ago, this incident is being recorded so that we will learn that argument can flare up over something very silly, really. But you took my towel. How petty something should be that at the conclusion of a fight about a towel, one girl pushes another girl down a well. And yet at the same time, we're also hearing from such apparent distressing situation, something favorable has now come. And when I sometimes before weddings, I'm also requested to perform the Navagraha puja, a puja to nine planets, one of which is Shukra or Venus, which is the the antecedent of our other player here in the story. So I tell the story of the mango fruit and the palasha fruit. Now, as a British man going to India, I don't know much about the trees. Certainly for the first time when I went to India, I didn't know much about the trees and the fruit. And when you see the beauty of the palasha flower, you think that the fruit is going to be something tasty. But if you taste a palasha fruit, you never want to taste one again. However, when you see the when you see the flower of a mango tree, you can be forgiven for thinking that nothing good will ever come from this tree. It's not a flower that you would find remarkable, but the fruit is the supposed king of all fruits, is the best flavor of any fruit. Subjectively speaking, of course. So it is said that in life is also like that. Something unremarkable happens, but it heralds something very delicious and flavorsome that's going to come just afterwards. And sometimes something wonderful seems to happen in your life, and just after it, something disappointing comes, something that leaves you with a foul taste. So a transcendentalist, a person who is trying to rise above the comings and goings, the ups and downs of life generally, does not become too excited when something good happens, because he or she knows that it will change. Similarly, he or she does not become overly disappointed or despairing when something bad happens, because she knows that things will change. So in this way, a person who has some sort of transcendental vision, or transcendental vision also means a long-term vision. It means that I can see the consequences of my activities, and I know that by doing something now, I will get something in the future. It's difficult now, it will be better in the future. It's pleasurable now, but it may not be so in the future. This is because a transcendentalist, someone who's rising above material nature, understands that my luggage, which is my karma from my previous life, is being unpacked during this life. Just like if you have many items of luggage and you're in a new hotel and you're unpacking that luggage, you have 5 cases. Let's say you're a heavy traveler, an experienced traveler maybe. You paid a lot for your luggage, so you're opening one piece of luggage after another. And as things come out, you're interacting with your luggage. Oh yes, this is where I put it. Oh, I'm so glad. Oh, I see, I've forgotten to pack this. Didn't. So life is unpacking your karmic luggage, which you brought with you on the subtle plane, on the astral plane. It becomes revealed to you in this life. So there are some things which will elate you, excite you, interest you, make you very positive. And there's those things that are destined to make you despair, lose hope, feel negative. But it's just luggage. It's not what you are, it's just what you're choosing to interact with. So how do you rise above those things? Well, you choose not to identify with the luggage unpacker, which is me, mine, I, and all the external labels which we give ourselves and allow the world to give to us. You can only really truly rise above material nature and be detached, which doesn't mean that you won't be a happy person. You'll be a very happy person if you decide that I am more than this, I am above this, I am the soul within. And this brings us to two words which I was explaining this morning to a temple room full of devotees in London. One word is vyavaharika, which means conventional. It's the identity that you bring with you. It's the name that's on your passport. It's how you interact with people when they say, what do you do? Who are you? Where do you come from? Where were you born? Oh, I'm from Idaho. Then we moved here to New York. It's the conventionality. So that's one identity. It's valid, but the paramarthika identity is who you really are, the spiritual essence of who we are. And so that's equally important. However, we do not reject one in favor of the other. The reason is you need both, because you have both. So when we say that we are living a spiritual life, it doesn't mean that we're leaving behind my conventional identity. We just know that that's an identity that I'm using. And to organize society, we have to be a little bit vyavaharika engaged, conventionally engaged. Otherwise, spirit souls, they do not get married, for instance. Here's King Yayati, and he's in his king identity. And here's Devyani, she's in her young lady identity. And if we apply Bhagavad Gita and its paramarthika, we would say, well, he's a spirit soul, she's a spirit soul. They're both identical persons. That's true. However, it's possible to live with that. You have to engage, you engage with the world as your other identity. For instance, I was in India. I was traveling in India, in Andhra Pradesh. We'd been on a padayatra, a week-long walking. I don't say it's a holiday. It was a tough gig. But we were coming back in a taxi along a street, along a country road, actually, in Andhra Pradesh at midnight. And the windows were wound down because it's hot in India. So because I'm British, when I see a four-legged animal crossing the road that looks sort of dog-shaped, I immediately project my British reality on that street scene. And I think, oh, here's a dog crossing the road. And because I'm British, I put out my hand to pat the dog just as we were driving by slowly in the taxi. However, mental projection is not reality, I think you'll find. And so when I passed by the dog, I pulled my hand back because the dog was not a dog, it was a tiger, a real live tiger, just that far from my hand. So I saved my hand. And we had to stop in the next village and say, you know, there's a tiger back there on the road, which provoked some concern because we were just passing through and they had to live there. So the tiger is a spirit soul, I'm a spirit soul. But if I treat the tiger as I would treat, you know, a fellow devotee at the Bhakti Center, then I would embrace the tiger and the tiger would certainly embrace me and it would be all over. So conventionality is something that you work with and can't be denied, but spirituality is what you understand to be your inner essence. And that's also what we are trying to reveal. And the reason I say these things is because in the world today, we are caught between what we are dealing with, our conventional identity, male, female, somewhere in between, transgender, or we, we have rich and poor, we have red and blue states, we have all kinds of choices that we make in how we lead our life, and we have to deal with each other in such a way that we respect differences. However, at the same time, we have a spirituality about us that is constantly trying to come out of us, and therefore there's a tendency for us to project the equality that we experience. So how to do that? So Vedic culture says, yes, we have to take into consideration both of these things. So you do have a spiritual identity, that's true, but you also have a material or external identity in this life, and we also have to respect that too. So you're a tiger, respect the tiger. At the same time, understand the tiger's an Atma, a spiritual being in transit, the same as you. So therefore, there are considerations of how to establish peace in society, because when society is peaceful, we can all get on. And sometimes the solution to peace in a society isn't what you think. It's not equalizing everybody and everything so it becomes a sort of social mush or a psychological mush, a kitchery of supposed equality in the face of external differences. So here's the king, and he says, well, what about, and Prabhupada is suggesting, we don't know, but the commentator here is suggesting that he's asked her caste, meaning, are you eligible for from a different type of interaction? And we do that, although we would say we completely repudiate such caste distinctions. We do it anyway. We may say we have an egalitarian society without a monarchy, but even in a society without a monarchy, we have presidential families and we have celebrity families. So there's a tendency to honor certain people in certain ways and to treat them as completely different. And as I said before, those who have an opportunity to marry a prince, they do. So the point is that they should have known better to get themselves in this situation. And what does Prabhupada say here? He says, her words were saturated with love and affection. Well, we may ask the question, was it genuine? I mean, she was just in the well. He approached her and was saving her. But Prabhupada says he must have appreciated her youthful beauty. And then she says, we are already married because you've accepted my hand. She was enamored with him and requested him not to change his mind and let another come to marry her. Her point was that this has been arranged by destiny, that it must be destiny because I'm feeling that this moment has been created by something unhappy. It was a fight between us as friends. And now, as a result of that, I was thrown down a well. Very unlucky for me. And now this has turned into my good fortune because you're here. So I see the hand of destiny in all of this. And therefore, I think you should just accept my hand in marriage. So we shall see that he does actually respond very favorably to her request. And sometimes it's like that, isn't it? We have a situation where, you know, things were going bad, and then out of the badness comes something good. The Bible talks about this, the Christian Bible, the Old Testament talks about a dead, what was it, a dead lion, and out of the stomach of the lion, which was rotting flesh, there was some bees, and they were making honey. So sweetness came forth from the dead animal. They'd made a hive inside, and sweetness came out. So in order to help us, most religious scriptures tell us, don't give up. Just don't give up. I was with, just last weekend, I was with a group of Alcoholics Anonymous, an AA group. And there was about 30 of them. And we were going through the 12 steps of the Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, their big book. And I was paralleling it with Bhagavad Gita. But their first step, as in the Bhagavad Gita's first step, is to reach a point where you realize that you can't go on without Isha, without the hand of God. So Arjuna gets to this point, and alcoholics get to this point. So they call this point, this first step, honesty. Honesty. That I am in the grip of something really powerful and I can't get out. But the next step is hope. Because I take all my difficulties and I say to my higher power, God, as I understand him to be, dear God, I can't go further. I can't make one step further. I'm begging you, please come in and sort it out for me. So you don't get to hand over your problem to God unless you admit that you've got a problem. So I said to this group, I said, you've all been through this situation. I said, how many of you would really, first of all, like the idea that a book or a person tells you that you're hopeless, that you're in the grip of something so powerful, you will never be able to do it, find your way out on your own. And they laughed. They said, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that you would join a group and the first step in the group is for someone to tell you that you are hopeless in the grip of a habit that you can't break free from. I said it was the same in Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna had to come to the point of despair before he could go forward. So the first step is despair. First step is the unpleasant task of realizing the pain that you're going through is self-induced, and therefore you can't break free unless you have the help of someone else. And that, not another human being, but perhaps another human being who points you to God. So this was an interesting thing. And of course, the whole point is surrender. So I was going backwards and forwards between the 12 steps of AA and the Bhagavad Gita. And at the end of it, we had a big kirtan, and it was wonderful. They all did japa. We had a kirtan, and people understood. I think if you've been through pain in your life, you understand what it means to be set free from pain. And it's a wonderful thing. But in all of our scriptures, you know, our scriptures begin with pain, don't they? Bhagavad Gita begins with pain. I can't go on. Krishna steps in and says, you fool. What you haven't understood is that you're spiritual by nature. Srimad Bhagavatam, Parikshit Maharaj is in pain. He's in pain. I'm going to die. Right? How much more pain do you want than to know that you're going to die? In 7 days, you got a week left. And what shall I do? I'm in pain. And he took that pain and he found a sadhu who could elevate him off the plane of pain and to a true understanding. The holy Ramayana, the Ramayana begins with pain. You know, get out of the palace, go and live in the forest, and I banish you. I take away your rights, the rights that you were born with, I strip you of all possibilities of ever being the king. And Ramayana truly begins at that point, doesn't it? So in all these situations, something good eventually comes out of something bad. What we need to understand is that when the bad thing is happening, when the pain is happening, God is on our side. God is with us and takes us by the hand and takes us through to the next step. So maybe I finish there and we will have some discussion. Hare Krishna Bhakti Center, so nice.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Mr. Interfaith.
Thank you very much for that last point, that when we become akinchana gocharam, materially exhausted, and understanding, no matter how I rearrange the furniture on this sinking ship, it's not going to help. Right? That's a really good point. The story about Marjayati and how they became attracted on the basis of her beauty and his masculine strength is kind of interesting. And the Bhagavatam describes steps that people went through before they came to the point of turning to Krishna. So we know that an inappropriate way of beginning and establishing a relationship is just on the basis of a material attraction. But that there's a higher level. You're talking about the astrological thing, and even higher than that is that if people join together with the intention of serving Krishna, with the intention of taking shelter of the spiritual master, with the intention of practicing sadhana carefully and associating with devotees and dedicating ourselves to devotional service, that's a very stable platform for a relationship between husband and wife, or all of us. That's our actual nature, is to serve Krishna. And how we want to say, because the Bhagavatam is about glorifying Krishna, how wonderful is Krishna. How wonderful is Krishna, that he's allowing us to fumble around, but he's also calling us and guiding us, reaching out to us and teaching us through these stories. Okay, they did this, and then look what happened. But then at one point in the story, toward the end of the story, Marjayati realizes, what is the use of all this, indulgence in sensual activity? There must be something else. So we want to remember that Krishna is calling us to that. Thank you very much for the class. I'm sorry to comment so long. Maybe somebody else will share. Wonderful is Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Yeah, by the end of this chapter, we find a king who, he had lust for 1,000 years. And at the end, his conclusion was, it's like trying to put out a fire by pouring on ghee. It's not working. I have learned my lesson. We have Athena.
Yeah.
We have Athena, very active there. She's got her hand up.
Hare Krishna, Kripamoya, Babu.
Hare Krishna, Athena. How are you?
Well, thank you. I just want to say, first, I was sad to have missed your last session live, but I made sure to watch it on YouTube. I love your sessions. I feel like you use just the best examples, real life examples. Your storytelling to illustrate your points are just so fantastic and captivating. So I'm so glad you came back so quickly on this channel. I hope it happens. This is a pattern that happens continuously. I guess I had 2 comments that I'd love your thoughts on. And these were things that just naturally came up. The first one was, I thought your point that I guess spirituality or turning to God really starts with kind of this despair and this pain. And it reminded me of the 7:16 in Bhagavad Gita of how there's 4 types of people who turn to God. And one of them is the one in distress. But it's just so interesting, though, that in one sense, all these great examples, Arjuna, Parikshit, I mean, in one sense, remind me that it didn't turn to God because Ram is God, but it kind of starts with pain. I mean, all these examples, though, are in one sense distress, yet distress isn't valued as the highest type to turn towards God, yet we see that those are all the examples that really, in one sense, spiritual life starts. I don't know if you want to comment on that a bit. I just found that interesting. That's my first one. Thank you.
Yeah, I perhaps any of you Prabhujis who can remind me, but I seem to remember that Srila Prabhupada was asked, and I was joking about this morning. These days in 2021, you can't be a Prabhupada disciple and say, Prabhupada said, because the youngsters will say, when did he say it? Where did he say it? Chapter, verse, conversation, class. Was that March 74 or was it April 74? Prabhuji, tell us. But anyway, if my memory serves me right, Prabhupada was once asked, out of these 4 types of people, what sort of person comes to Krishna? And he said, in Kali Yuga, he said, it is mostly distress. Most people are distressed in some way. But it simply doesn't mean if they are distressed, they will naturally turn to Krishna. They have to have some piety, he said. And then there was an incident where there was some problems in nearby Bangladesh, and Hindus were coming over the border. And one of the places that they came to was our Mayapur temple in West Bengal. And devotees set up a food distribution, prasadam distribution service. And many hundreds of people would come and they would take prasadam daily. And a devotee commented to Prabhupada that these people are they're coming because they're poor. Prabhupada said, no. He said, there are many, many hundreds who are also poor. They're also hungry, but they're not coming to us. These people are coming to us because they're hungry, poor, and they want to take shelter of Krishna Prasadam. They want to take shelter of Krishna. So they're not only distressed, but they're pious, and they're turning to God, using that piety to turn to God. So distress on its own, unfortunately, doesn't bring people to God. Sometimes too much distress, and there has to be a little piety. Is that right? That's my impression. Just a thought. And your second question, Athena?
Thank you so much. The second question, it's a little tangential, but I love the fact that you came from a Christian background. And it was just a thought, and I don't know if you want to comment or kind of speak to the parallels, but I just really, really, really appreciate your point that we can't ignore, in one sense, the material nature and conditioning that we're given in this lifetime. And I know I'm early on in spirituality, and just, of course, perhaps it's people I've heard from, but because you always hear, we're not this body, we're not this body, my sense, and even those that perhaps I associated with, very much neglect, say, this identity that we're given in this life, because the ideal is just, we're not this body, we're a spirit soul. You kind of completely neglect the psychophysical in one aspect. But what I have appreciated so much is in the Christian faith, their paradigm, in our paradigm, it's, gross body, subtle body, and soul. In this Christian paradigm, it's body, soul, spirit. And they very much take care of the psychophysical because in that paradigm, in one sense, the soul is very much a part of you. So that's a comment. I just appreciate that. This is, in one sense, most directly I've heard from a senior devotee, that one must also it's marrying the two. There's no neglect of the fact that you are a man in this lifetime, you're given a certain physical nature and intelligence. But I guess I'd love to hear, because I'm not so well versed, but in the Christian paradigm of this concept of body, soul, spirit. And I've always thought, in one sense, and I know you have to be careful to compare paradigms, but in one sense, the soul, I was always saying, well, it's kind of our subtle body, right? Because their soul encompasses the mind and the personality. And their spirit is really what we call the soul, because the spirit is always turned to God. We go, well, the soul is always part and parcel. But when you hear a little bit more, it's not a direct, it kind of like their soul straddles a bit of our soul. It's just, I don't know. I know that's a jumbled question, but I'd love for you to comment on that. Thank you.
It's a good question. I may not have too much time. Yashoda Dulal has put his hand up, and I think that may be the sign that the time together is at an end. Am I right, Yashoda Dulal?
No. You have time. Take as much time as you want. Thank you.
Okay. Well, what I would say to your very intelligent question, Athena, is that there is a multi-level reality, which is us. One is the physical reality, one is the astral body or subtle body, the mind, intelligence, and the ego. Then there's the spiritual reality, which survives the death experience. This is known as the Atma. And the difficulty with using the word soul, or us as Vaishnavas translating Atma into the word soul, is that soul does have Christian connotations. And the Christian connotations is that somehow the soul is part of the package, whereas for the Vaishnava or the Eastern philosopher, the soul is the entire being, which is working with a karmic accretion, sort of like something that is stuck onto the soul, which is the body, the mind, and the ego package. So that's one thing. Second thing is when we make contact with a guru, the guru is a representative of Krishna. So Krishna immediately discards any of Arjuna's, but I am the body, I am a Kshatriya, I am the father of children, it'll destroy the dynasty. Krishna wants to get to the thing that is most difficult to understand. Similarly, a guru will try to go for something which is very difficult to understand and saying, you're not that body, you're not that body, you are the soul. So in most of ISKCON's verbiage, meaning the way we communicate, that lesson is paramount. However, what sometimes we have to be very careful, because that can lead in people who don't have a balanced approach to this idea that, and the body is useless, the body is nothing. And of course, for the second generation, our children, this sometimes means that they have gotten the impression that they should not engage with society at all, or that the body is, a worthless bag of chemicals. And of course, this low body image causes them not to sometimes have even decent respect for health or for dharma, ordinary dharma, just ordinary, everything from good manners to good behavior. And we sometimes see that they disengage from society as a whole, so it's difficult for them to get a job, sometimes in some cases. So I'm more of the opinion, after many, many years, that we have to be balanced in our approach. And this is borne out by a paper which was written by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in which he said that every attempt to understand your spiritual self has to be done within the matrix of cultural, social, educational, financial, etc., like that. It's difficult to separate these things. Is that okay?
Yes. That was incredible.
Good.
Thank you for such an incredible answer. Thank you. Haribol.
Thank you for your enthusiasm. Yashoda Dula?
Thank you. Yes. I've heard my brilliant friend Venkata Bhatta say in this context the point that Athena raised. And I've heard him explain this to like newer people, newer practitioners, that you're more than just your body and mind.
Yeah, very good. Yeah.
And I thought that was very interesting. And then he goes on to explain the soul. I had a question. So about, midway through your class, you talked about how the transcendentalist doesn't get overly elated when there is good stuff that happens and overly depressed when bad stuff happens. And it's kind of equiposed. So I'm thinking, I've been hearing, this for like 20 something years. and I accept it. But say you were talking to a bunch of new people, wouldn't they respond by saying, well, you guys are like, joyless creatures, because, you're like kind of like just going through life robotically, not feeling joy or sorrow. How do you respond to that?
I would say that joy comes from within and then reaches the face from within. And I would point to the happy smiles of devotees. Prabhupada was walking on a street in New York, and a New York policeman came up to him, and the policeman had nothing to do with the Hare Krishnas. And he said to Prabhupada, he said, "Excuse me, sir, do you know you're glowing?" Prabhupada was on a plane, and he said, well, wasn't it the captain said, he said, your followers look very joyful. They look very joyful. I think if we were not joyful, if devotees of Krishna were not evidently happy, then perhaps no one would be interested in what we had to say. I think it's very difficult to be interested in what a miserable person has to say. And like Prabhupada said, if you're a man who is destitute and you have no money, he said, who is going to take financial advice from such a man? If he is sitting by the side of the road, begging for coins, who's going to take your financial advice? You made mistakes. So I think because devotees are naturally happy, and that's evident. Well, that's one thing when I was 17, I came to the temple for the first time, and devotees said, Prabhupada said, chant and be happy. And if you chant, you'll always be happy. So as in my first japa period, I was looking around and I was saying, who's happy and who's grumpy, who's just miserable? And I came to the devotee afterwards and I said, well, he's happy, but what about him? He doesn't look very happy at all. This was a devotee he was grimacing as he was chanting, one of these devotees would shake their head, I said, he doesn't look very happy at all. He's struggling. They said, no, that's just japa. Now you go and speak to him. And I spoke to him afterwards and he was happy. Anyway, it's I wanted to know, if I give my time to these people, if I choose to believe what they're telling me, I want to make sure that it works. So my next question was, well, how long has he been here? How long has he been chanting? And I had to, make my decisions based on that. So it is for new people. We do want to see happy. But if the group last weekend was anything to go by, chanting Hare Krishna made them happy. They enjoyed it. Yes, someone whose face I recognize, Janavi Harrison. Are you the Janavi Harrison?
No, I'm the other one. I had a question that you were referring to the fight between the two ladies as it was, petty argument. It was a fight over a towel.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it resulted in something very positive. And I don't know why I started thinking about this, but I was just thinking that within the big family, Lord Chaitanya family, the Chaitanya tree, there's lots of different groups, and historically there's been different kinds of disagreements. Some people might say they're petty, especially a younger generation of devotees might look and say, well, what, that you're all followers of Lord Chaitanya, why argue? I mean, I'm not saying it's arguing over a towel, but it might seem like that or feel like that. I just wondered if you could comment on that and sort of what would the upside of that be? What would the value be? Because sometimes it seems like we're all so close together. Shouldn't we be more unified rather than, quibbling over small things?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a good question for today because, of course, today we are celebrating, remembering Krishnadas, Kaviraj Goswami. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami was the writer of a biography of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu called the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It was the 7th in a series of biographies. The first 6 biographies were written, 3 of them were written in Sanskrit, and 3 of them were written in Bengali. And this did nothing to touch both communities, because there were 2 divergent communities of followers of Chaitanya. One was on the eastern side, Bengal and Puri, headed up by Nityananda Prabhu, whose missionary work was going to the villages along with his 64 gopas. And then there was the more Vairagya community, the more scholarly Pandit community of the Goswamis in Vrindavan. So without them even knowing, there was a lot of theological disagreement between them, although they never came to blows because there was just so much of Indian geography in between them. But it began to be known, and so they wanted a biography to be written that would heal any divisions and bring together the 2 communities. But at the same time was a biography where the theology was flexible enough that you could believe in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu without being in a theological straitjacket, so to speak. So the 7th biography of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was written by Krishnadas, and it was a compilation of stories from, for instance, Murari Gupta, who had written a Bengali biography of Chaitanya in 1535. He was really early on. So his was Bengali. And then Kavi Karnapur wrote the Krishna Chaitanya Charitamrita Mahakavya, which was in Sanskrit, beautiful Sanskrit poetry. So Krishnadas, his genius was bringing these all together. So he took the diaries of Murari Gupta, and he took information from Raghunath Bhatta, who was the servant with Swarup Damodar, the personal secretary of Lord Chaitanya, who witnessed his later pastimes. And then he brought in, word for word, verses from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu of the Rupa Goswami. So that's all bound together in the one book. And Chaitanya Charitamrita is a book of, it's 1,500 Sanskrit shlokas, which make the posts. And then the fencing between the posts is Bengali, and that's 10,000 verses. And 1/6 of all the Sanskrit verses in Chaitanya Charitamrita are directly from the Srimad Bhagavatam. And he also references 75 other books in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So when this was received by the devotees, it was received at a time when there was a need for not exactly healing between the divisions, but there was definitely different understandings. Just like when Jesus Christ left the world, there was different understandings. Some said he's a great saint. Some said he's a great saint who is infused with the Spirit of God. Some said he's the Son of God. Some said he's directly God in the flesh. Some said he's sometimes God and sometimes human. And some said he's completely human and simultaneously completely God. So there was different, and they fought about it like anything. There was papal armies, and there was a great slaughter of theological purity. But Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami's one book, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, has stopped any possible fighting between the different communities, and it healed it, along with the words of Lord Nityananda's wife a little later on, Janava Devi. So, sorry, I just had to say that today because we're celebrating Krishnadas. And sorry, got in a flow. But contemporarily, it would seem, I think, devotees have to do two things. They have to get off the internet and they have to read Chaitanya Charitamrita, because you'll be surprised how many people have not read that book. And if you read that book, there's all sorts of questions that are answered by it. All sorts of questions. The whole principle of being a Gaudiya Vaishnava is theological flexibility. That's the whole point. It's like, it's not rigid. There's enough in there that you can be, you can find your space. But to find your space, you have to find your people. And you have to find people. And then you have to develop your people into a community. So there's room for everybody. We're not Abrahamic in the sense we're not like Christians. We're not like Christians. We're not like Muslims. We're not like Jews, in that we have to have only one rigid interpretation and one rigid application. And there's one universal standard for all. There are different applications. This is the heart of, you could say, the flexibility of our message and our practice. Because, of course, Varnashram Dharma itself is Krishna's codes for humanity, codes of Dharma for humanity. And that's very, very different. Even in our ashram system, we don't have much of a Varna system, but we have an ashram system. Sannyasis don't touch a woman. Grihastas touch women as long as you're married. Brahmacharis don't think about women. So there's rigid codes, but they're all devotees of Krishna. So we have already different codes. If you're the difficult thing here is that we resist categorization in the name of spirituality. We resist labeling other devotees as this or that. We want everybody to be generic. And as I say, this artificial, it's an artifice, and it reduces society to mush. And we're going to be paying the price for it for a long time if we're not careful. Not our society. Well, our society will. If you apply the ideals of what they now call postmodernism, which is wreaking havoc intellectually in society, if you do that with ISKCON, then ISKCON will be profoundly weaker as a result. This so-called spiritual tendency to, to be woke and to not offend others and to reduce all differences between people as an attempt to, create tolerance and a mutual acceptance within society, and thereby create peace and work towards it's like you have a body, you have a human body, and the liver does the work of the liver. And if you try to force the liver to be the kidney, you've got problems. If the kidney is forced to do the work of the heart or tries to be a heart, they each have their specific function. So all that Krishna is saying in the Varnashram system, and all that we should be saying, is that different people have different things, as long as it's all centered on the same thing, centered on God. Slightly different views. There will always be slightly different views. The difficult thing is that if those slightly different views cause you to condemn another person or to work separately from them, then we've lost the harmony. It's like an orchestra, a beautiful orchestra. Beautiful orchestra. You don't force the trombones to be the keyboard instrument. You don't force the strings to be the tuba. Everybody. The beauty of an orchestra is that every instrument is playing their tune. So the beauty of ISKCON is that everybody, the different instruments, are playing the same tune, but with a different resonance, different energy. Hare Krishna. Seems like we've gone over time.
a little bit, but this was so profound. I'm going to, have people go in and listen to the YouTube recording of this Q&A session afterwards. In particular, it's so profound, and especially this last one that you gave us such a nice framework. And thank you for living that example, Kripamoya Prabhu, of like respectful dialogue and encouraging people to ask questions that might be different from say your understanding, and explaining it patiently, because I think that's incredibly necessary and valuable in our society. So thank you so much. And we'll have you again on the channel whenever you're ready. Always love to hear from you.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much for this opportunity. Twice in a week is wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Tomorrow is Rajalila Devi from Gita Nagri. So please tune in 7:15 a.m. New York time, 12:15 UK time. Thank you very much. Kripamoya Prabhu ki jai. Shla
Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada ki jai. See you tomorrow.